Ever wondered how a small island nation came to rule over a quarter of the world's population? How did the sun, for centuries, never set on its dominions? Today, we're embarking on an epic journey through time to uncover the entire history of the British Empire, from its humble beginnings to its final, dramatic decline. So, grab a cup of tea, and let's dive in. Our story doesn't start with grand fleets, but with daring privateers and merchants in the late 16th century. England, eyeing the immense wealth Spain and Portugal were pulling from the New World, wanted a piece of the action. Figures like Sir Francis Drake were less like naval commanders and more like state-sponsored pirates, raiding Spanish ships and settlements. Early attempts at colonization, like Roanoke in North America, were fraught with failure. But the ambition was there. The seed of empire had been planted. The 17th century saw the first real roots of the empire take hold. In 1607, Jamestown was founded in Virginia, marking the first permanent English settlement in the Americas. This wasn't about imperial glory just yet. It was about profit. The Virginia Company, a joint stock company, was looking for gold, but found something just as valuable: tobacco. This cash crop fueled the growth of the southern colonies. Meanwhile, further north, religious dissenters, the Pilgrims and Puritans, established colonies in New England, seeking religious freedom and building societies based on their own strict principles. Across the Atlantic, another crucial piece of the puzzle was falling into place. The English East India Company, chartered in 1600, began establishing trading posts in India. Initially, they were just one of several European powers competing for spices and textiles. But through shrewd diplomacy, strategic alliances with local rulers, and eventually their own private army, they slowly but surely outmaneuvered their rivals, particularly the French. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 is often seen as the turning point, securing the company's dominance in Bengal and laying the groundwork for British rule in India. By the 18th century, the empire was a sprawling, transatlantic network. The so-called First British Empire was primarily focused on the Americas and the West Indies. This was the era of mercantilism, the idea that colonies existed purely to enrich the mother country. A triangular trade route emerged. British ships carried manufactured goods to Africa, traded them for enslaved people, transported these captives across the horrific Middle Passage to the Americas to work on plantations producing sugar, cotton, and tobacco, which were then shipped back to Britain. It was a system of immense wealth built on unimaginable human suffering, a dark legacy that casts a long shadow over the empire's history. But this first empire was about to face its biggest crisis. After the costly 7 Years' War against France, Britain was deep in debt. Tupai, for Eat London, decided to tax its American colonies, arguing it was fair since the war had been fought, in part, to protect them. The colonists, who had no representation in the British Parliament, saw it differently. No taxation without representation became their rallying cry. Tensions boiled over, leading to the American Revolution. In 1783, Britain was forced to recognize the independence of the United States. It was a stunning, humiliating loss. The jewel of its empire was gone. Did this signal the end? Far from it. This defeat prompted a major shift in imperial strategy. Britain pivoted, turning its attention eastward. This is often called the Second British Empire. Captain James Cook's voyages had mapped vast territories in the Pacific, leading to the colonization of Australia, initially as a penal colony, starting in 1788. In India, the British government took more direct control from the East India Company, especially after the major Indian uprising of 1857. India became the jewel in the crown, a massive source of resources, manpower, and prestige, with Queen Victoria being declared Empress of India in 18. The 19th century was the imperial century, the Pax Britannica. Britain's Industrial Revolution gave it an unmatched technological and economic edge. Its powerful Royal Navy patrolled the world's oceans, protecting trade routes and projecting power. The empire expanded relentlessly. The scramble for Africa in the late 19th century saw Britain claim vast territories from Egypt in the north to South Africa. They took control of places like Nigeria, Kenya, and Rhodesia. They expanded into Southeast Asia, securing Malaya and Singapore, a vital strategic port. The ideology of the civilizing mission became popular. The belief that Britain had a duty to bring commerce, Christianity, and its form of civilization to what it viewed as lesser peoples. It was a justification that masked economic exploitation and the often brutal reality of colonial rule. At its zenith, just after the First World War, the British Empire covered nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface. From the icy expanse of Canada to the deserts of Australia, from the bustling cities of India to tiny islands in the Pacific, it was a global superpower unlike any seen before. But the seeds of its own destruction were already sprouting. The very ideas of liberty and self-determination that Britain championed at home were inspiring nationalist movements across its colonies. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi in India began to organize mass movements demanding independence, using non-violent resistance to challenge British authority. The Second World War dealt the final, fatal blow. Britain emerged victorious, but was economically shattered. It no longer had the resources or the political will to maintain a global empire. The United States and the Soviet Union were now the world's dominant superpowers, and both were ideologically opposed to old-style colonialism. The winds of change were blowing, and they were blowing hard. The process of decolonization began rapidly. In 1947, the great jewel in the crown, India, gained its independence, though it was tragically partitioned into India and Pakistan. This event triggered a cascade. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, one colony after another achieved independence: Ghana in 1957, Nigeria in 1960, Kenya in 1963. Sometimes the transition was peaceful. Other times, it was marked by violent conflict. The Suez Crisis of 1956, where Britain was forced into a humiliating withdrawal from Egypt by American pressure, starkly demonstrated that its days as a unilateral world power were over. The final chapter of the empire is often marked by the handover of Hong Kong to China in 1997. It was a symbolic end to a story that had spanned over 400 years. What was left was the Commonwealth of Nations, a voluntary association of independent states, most of which were former British colonies. The legacy of the British Empire is complex, contentious, and still debated fiercely today. It brought infrastructure, a common language, and systems of law and administration to many parts of the world. But it also brought exploitation, violence, and the imposition of foreign rule, leaving deep scars that are still felt. To understand our modern world, its borders, its conflicts, its economies, and its cultures, we must understand the story of the British Empire in all its glory and its controversy. Thank you so much for joining me on this whirlwind tour through history. If you found this journey fascinating, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the past, and let me know in the comments what piece of history you'd like us to explore next. See you in the next video.